The clock on the wood-panelled wall struck midnight with a soft, deliberate chime. 12 times, spaced like heartbeats. Howard Langley stood alone in his office at Harriman & Co., his figure tall, framed against the frosted window that blurred the city's steel, bones beyond. The overhead lamp glowed amber, casting a circle of warmth over a mahogany desk stacked with leather-bound ledgers and one pale envelope sealed in red wax. He adjusted his cufflinks. Gold. Custom. He turned as the doorknob clicked. The via man who entered wore black, hat, coat, gloves. His shoes made no sound on the thick Persian rug. Langley said nothing at first. Neither did the visitor. Then Langley motioned to the guest chair. "I didn't expect you," Langley said, voice even, but dry. "Not tonight." The visitor sat, removing only his gloves. His face remained in shadow beneath the brim of the hat. "You left the ledger open," the man said. His voice was low, educated, precise. Langley folded his arms. "So you saw it." "I saw enough." The silence between them stretched, taut as wire. Langley reached into a drawer and produced 2 crystal glasses. He poured from a decanter of brandy, the liquid catching the light like molten garnet. "Drink?" The man hesitated, then shook his head. Langley shrugged, poured only one, and took a sip. He winced. "Tastes wrong." The man leaned forward slightly. "She knows." Langley placed the glass down slowly. "Not yet, but she will." "You're going to tell her?" "I already wrote it. In the letter." "It's done." The man's voice sharpened. "Then why call me?" Langley's eyes narrowed. "To give you the chance to explain it." There was nothing to explain. Langley didn't move. "You always had a talent for numbers and secrets, but laundering through Vestal 17, that was amateur." "You're not in a position to critique," the man replied coldly. Langley gave a short laugh. "No? Then tell me, where did the money go?" Silence. Langley tapped the desk. "That's what I thought." The man stood. "You're making a mistake." Langley stayed seated, his hands now still. "She deserves to know," he said. "Everything." The visitor leaned in, the edge of his coat brushing the corner of the desk. "She already suspects. But if you tell her, it will kill her." Langley didn't blink. "That's not yours to decide." The man straightened. Langley picked up the glass again, swirling the amber brandy. He took another sip, slower, then froze. His throat worked once, then again. He coughed. Once. Twice. His eyes widened. The man didn't move. Langley looked down at the glass, then at the visitor. His voice was faint. "Tell her," he gasped. The red ink, his fingers clutched at the edge of the desk, was no accident. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Langley staggered back, one hand at his throat. The almond sweet scent of cyanide rose, faintly in the warm air. He fell to his knees, then sideways, landing with a soft thud. On the rug, his mouth hung open, lips tinged faintly blue. The man watched. A breath, another. Then he retrieved his gloves, slid them on with care, and walked out. The door closed behind him without a sound. The dining room of the brownstone was quiet except for the soft clink of silver against porcelain. The scent of Fritz's eggs à la truffe drifted through warm lamplight, mingling with black coffee and the faintest trace of wood polish. Wolfe sat motionless in his yellow chair, wide shoulders settled like a Buddha's, arms folded. His gaze hovered over the morning paper propped against the syrup pot. I sat opposite, coffee in one hand, section B in the other. "Page 2, bottom right," I said, tapping the print with my fork. "A banker, dead at his desk. Wall Street, midnight. Cyanide. That's what I call a full stop." Wolfe didn't glance up. "Your standards for novelty remain regrettably modest." Novel enough. No sign of forced entry. 1 glass of brandy, 2 chairs warm, and the door locked from the inside. Coroner says cyanide. Police say suicide. Wife says no. That earned a twitch of one eyebrow. Her name's Langley, Claudia. Husband was Howard Langley, managing partner at Harriman & Co. She told the police she spoke with him at 10. Said he seemed tense. Said he mentioned a red ledger. Wolfe lowered his paper. A red ledger? According to the widow, it vanished from the office sometime between 10 and midnight. Wolfe grunted. I sipped my coffee. Suppose she's making it up. Wolfe lifted one palm. Assume nothing, except that suicide is rarely tidy and never decorous. He returned to his paper. I knew the look, interested, but unwilling to admit it, before breakfast was done. Then, the doorbell rang. Fritz, in accordance with long-established household law, did not move. I wiped my mouth and stood. The woman on the stoop wore a navy coat, cinched at the waist, with a dark pillbox hat set at an elegant angle. She looked up as I opened the door. Cool eyes, precise red lips, and a kind of stillness you get from grief well armored. "Mrs. Langley?" I asked. "Yes." She glanced past me toward the front hall, hesitating. "You must be Mr. Goodwin." "Archie," I said, stepping aside. "Come in. Mr. Wolfe is at breakfast. I won't keep him from it, but I believe he'll want to see what I've brought." Her voice had that Fifth Avenue finish, faintly European, barely touched by fatigue. She carried a slim briefcase in one hand, a deep red, almost the color of dried blood. She followed me into the front room. I tapped on the office door frame, then led her through. Wolfe didn't rise, of course, but he did tilt his head, the paper now flat on the table. "Mrs. Langley," I said, "this is Nero Wolfe. He's seated, but attentive." Wolfe gave a small nod. "Madam." She sat in one of the red chairs, resting her case on her lap. The scent of jasmine trailed behind her as she crossed one leg neatly over the other. "I understand your husband is recently deceased," Wolfe said. "Yes." "And you believe it was murder?" She opened the briefcase. "I believe he believed it. Enough to die for it, or to be killed over it." She withdrew a single item, a leather-bound ledger, worn at the edges, red with a brass clasp. She placed it gently on the table. "This is what he mentioned to me the night he died. He said, if anything happens, give this to Wolfe." I told him he was being absurd. He smiled and said, "No, Wolfe isn't absurd." Wolfe looked at the ledger but didn't touch it. "And why," he said slowly, "would your husband trust me with that? He admired you, secretly. He said you were the only mind in the city with fewer illusions than his." Wolfe allowed a slight movement of one eyebrow. "And the police? They dismissed me. The ledger wasn't found at the scene. I found it in the apartment this morning, under a false drawer in his desk. He must have brought it home, then returned. To the office later." I reached for the ledger, but Wolfe raised a finger. "Not yet." Claudia reached again into the briefcase and produced a smaller envelope, cream-colored, sealed in red wax. She handed it directly to Wolfe. "This was with it, addressed only to you." Wolfe took it delicately. He turned it over, held it to the light, then broke the seal. Inside was a small parchment note, no more than a few lines, and a folded square of thin cloth. He read in silence, then unfolded the fabric. It was a sachet, tied with thread. A faint scent escaped, subtle and golden. Wolfe sniffed, frowned, then rose. I blinked. He stepped to the windowsill and held the cloth closer to the light. Then he returned to his chair, settling heavily. "Saffron," he murmured. "Spanish, pure, 6 grams perhaps. Worth nearly $100. Why would your husband send me this?" Claudia's lips parted, but she shook her head. "I don't know. I only know that he was frightened. He said the numbers in the ledger, they didn't add up." Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, prepare the office. We will examine this properly." I rose, heading to the safe. Wolfe continued, addressing Claudia without warmth, but with interest. "You understand, madam, that if your husband was involved in criminal enterprise, our engagement may be brief." She met his gaze evenly. "He was arrogant, yes, ruthless, perhaps, but not corrupt." I placed the ledger on Wolfe's desk and opened it. The paper inside was crisp. The columns ran neat and lean, but every 7th page had a note in different ink. Wolfe leaned forward. "There," he said, pointing. "Line 17. The entry repeats, but with a different sum." Claudia nodded. "That's what he found. A client account named Vestal 17. No client by that name exists." Wolfe leaned back again. "Archie, what does the paper say about the time of death? Between midnight and 2. Office door locked from the inside. 1 glass on the desk. Brandy. Unfinished." Wolfe looked down at the saffron again. "Madam," he said, "I am reluctant to engage with the police at this early stage. Inspector Kramer is frequently competent, but always impatient. However, I accept your case, with one condition." "Yes? You tell me everything, not merely what you suspect, but what you fear." Her jaw tightened. She looked away, then back again. I fear that the man who killed my husband didn't do it for money. He did it to keep something quiet, and he's not done yet. Wolfe folded his hands. Then, madam, you have our attention. Fritz appeared silently with a second pot of coffee and a silver tray. Wolfe dismissed him with a nod and returned his eyes to the ledger. Archie, clear the afternoon. This requires silence. And a complete index. Will do, Claudia rose. I'll leave you to it. I have my husband's funeral to arrange. Wolfe nodded again. My condolences, and my thanks for the saffron. She almost smiled. Then she turned and left, the click of her heels measured, each step echoing in the brownstone's hush. The office was dim, save for the twin brass lamps that cast twin pools of amber on Wolfe's desk. The red ledger sat unopened at the centre, its brass clasp catching the light like an eyelid half closed. Wolfe was in his chair, yellow leather, high-backed, a throne by any measure. Claudia Langley, widow by both law and circumstance, faced him from the red chair opposite, legs crossed, gloved hands resting on the ledger as if it might bolt. I was at my desk, pad open, pen poised. Fritz had brought in coffee without a sound. He never brought it hot, but he never brought it cold either. Just exactly the right temperature to hold in hand while you listened. Wolfe lifted the envelope once more and looked at the parchment within. He didn't reread it. He merely observed it, as one might observe a rare moth. Then he folded it again and slid it inside. Madam, he said, we now come to terms. Claudia gave a slight nod. That's why I returned. You came, Wolfe replied, because you believe your husband's death was not suicide. I came, she said, because you haven't turned me away. That earned the slightest narrowing of Wolfe's eyes. You understand, he said, that I have no fondness for Wall Street. I distrust any endeavour that trades on perception. I thought you disliked any endeavour that involved movement, she replied with a faint smile. Wolfe's lips didn't move, but his eyes acknowledged the point. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a sealed envelope, heavy, rectangular burgundy wax again. She set it beside the ledger. This, she said, is a receipt from Masdevallia Rare Imports. 24 Dracula Vampira orchids, pre-arranged and paid in full. Delivery to this address, all legal. I checked. Wolfe raised a brow. I thought, you dislike payment in anything but cash. I said, I dislike lies more, Wolfe muttered, and reached for the ledger. He opened it at the first page and held it lightly between his thumbs. His eyes moved once left to right, then again. His nostrils flared, once. Page 13, Claudia said softly, and page 21. Wolfe flipped the pages with care. On page 13, a balance entry had been marked in red ink. It had been adjusted. On 21, a client name, Vestal 17, appeared, tied to a withdrawal dated 3 weeks before Langley's death. Wolfe tapped the table. A client? No. Wolfe looked at her. Then what? I don't know. That would be unusual, I offered. For a wife. She turned to me. We didn't share business. You shared a name, Wolfe said. That was the only thing left to share. Wolfe's gaze returned to the ledger. The falsification is clumsy, he murmured. The ink's tone differs. The pressure varies. This entry was forged. Yes, she said. Howard said he found it the day before he died. He said someone had been using a ghost account to shift funds internally, laundering it through dormant client records. Vestal 17, Wolfe murmured. I asked him if he had proof. He said the ledger was proof. He was wrong. No, Wolfe said. He was correct. He merely died before you could see it. He closed the ledger, hands now resting on its cover. You're convinced it was murder. I'm convinced my husband didn't kill himself over a balance sheet. Men have killed for less, but not him. He had ego enough to live through embarrassment, even prosecution. Perhaps he wasn't the one facing prosecution. She hesitated. Wolfe leaned forward half an inch. You said he was afraid. What did he say, precisely? Claudia looked down, then back up. He said, if I go through with this, someone will stop me. I asked him what he meant. He said, they won't kill me to protect money. They'll kill me to protect silence. Wolfe drew a breath, deep and slow. The silence, he said, is always the valuable part. He tapped the envelope again. And the saffron? I don't know. Has it any meaning between you? No. Then it has meaning to him. Perhaps a code. Perhaps a message. I scribbled the word saffron on my notepad and drew a small box around it. I'll look into it, I said. Wolfe grunted. Claudia stood. I'm not asking you to chase ghosts, Mr. Wolfe. I'm asking you to read numbers and listen. I do both, he said, but never cheaply. You have the orchids. Wolfe paused. You may consider yourself, for the moment, retained. Her jaw set faintly, then relaxed. She extended her hand. Wolfe didn't take it. Instead, he stood, slowly, and gave her a half bow. She turned and walked out, her heels striking the wood floor with metronomic precision. The door clicked shut. Wolfe returned to his chair and stared at the ledger. Then he shifted his gaze to me. Archie. Yes, sir. Find out what Vestal 17 is. Person, company, ship, anything. Yes, sir. And begin with Harriman and Cohen discreetly. Use your face, not your name. Yes, sir. He looked again at the saffron sachet. Fritz. A soft sound behind us. Yes, sir. Catalogue this, Wolfe said, holding out the cloth. Fritz accepted it with careful hands and disappeared. Wolfe reached for the ledger once more. Vestal, he muttered. Roman goddess of the hearth. Silence. Secrecy. He tapped his fingers. Once. 17, Archie. Prime number. Legal age. Gun caliber. It means something. Find out what. I stood, made a note, and picked up my hat from the rack. As I turned the doorknob, Wolfe spoke again. And Archie, do not get shot. No promises, I said, and left. The entrance to Harriman and Comer sat flush with the pavement on Broad Street, discreet, brass-lettered, and unimpressed by foot traffic. The plaque bore no flourish, just gravitas. Men in hats passed without glancing. Wealth, when old enough, doesn't advertise. Inside, the lobby exhaled respectability. Ticking clocks, pale light, and the hush of ledgers being balanced somewhere, behind oak panelling. I paused just past the revolving door to adjust my cuffs and rehearse my lie. I'd shaved closer than usual. That helps when you're selling fake credentials. The receptionist looked up from her switchboard, lipstick precise, posture calibrated. May I help you? Archibald Graham, I said, handing over a card I'd printed the night before. Financial. Digest. I have an 11 o'clock with Mr. Sherman Dole. She studied me and the card in equal measure. One moment, Mr. Graham, she buzzed through. Her voice was clipped and smooth. Meanwhile, I admired the office decor, black and white photos of steel construction, one oil painting of a ship mid-storm, and a ficus that had survived at least one recession. Moments later, a glass door opened down the hall, and a man stepped through, tall, silver-haired, and lean as a fencing blade. Sherman Dole, the kind of face you see on a cigarette ad, just before the Surgeon General ruins it. Mr. Graham? He asked, extending a hand with exactly the right amount of firmness. Come in. I followed him past the glass, down a hall that smelled of varnish and ambition. The offices on either side glowed softly behind opaque glass, voices murmuring inside. It was the kind of place where secrets didn't echo. Dole's office overlooked the exchange. He gestured toward a leather chair and took his place behind a minimalist desk. No family photos, no memorabilia, just a desk calendar, a crystal decanter of water, and 3 pens laid perfectly parallel. I understand you're covering volatility, he said, voice calm and radio smooth. Post-war instability in equities. My editor wants something current. Your partner's death qualified. His expression didn't change. Langley's passing was a loss, but I wouldn't call it news. I'd call it unexpected. He poured himself water, but didn't offer any. Howard carried pressure well. Too well, perhaps. You were close? We worked together for 15 years. You think he killed himself? I think men have limits. He may have found his. Was there a note? Dole's expression twitched. No. No signs? None you'd recognize from across a desk. He leave behind anything unusual? Statements? Instructions? He met my eyes squarely. Is this for a human interest column or an inquest? Depends on what I find. He folded his hands. Langley was brilliant, but brilliance frays under heat. He made enemies. Here, Dole didn't blink. Competitors, not colleagues. You point me to someone who worked more closely with him day to day. Ava Remington, client liaison. She managed Howard's portfolio transitions this past year. He stood. So did I. Her office is down the hall. Left of the chart room. Thank you, I said. And Mr. Dole, yes? You ever heard the term Vestal 17? That flicker again. Tiny, but there. No, he said. He didn't ask what it meant. I left the office, shoes silent on the polished corridor. A cleaning man in blue overalls was working near. The records room, pushing a cart of files. He glanced up, then away. I found the chart room, lined in glass, with ticking tape streaming along the far wall. Next to it, a brass placard. Client Relations, Miss Ava Remington. I knocked. The door opened with a whisper. Her office was smaller, more lived in. A cobalt vase with lilies on the windowsill. Brass letter opener on the desk. A teacup, untouched. Ava Remington looked up. She wore green wool and calm eyes. Dark hair, pinned. Posture like sculpture. Yes? She said. Archibald Graham, Financial Digest. Sherman Dole suggested I speak with you. Her brow twitched. Just once. I see. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk. I sat. So did she. I'm writing on Howard Langley. His death. She didn't flinch, but her hand tightened on the folder beside her. Yes. You worked closely with him? For over a year. Did he strike you as the type to take his own life? She considered. He was careful, guarded. He could be distant, but not fragile. Do you believe it was suicide? I believe. Men like Howard don't die alone at midnight without a reason. Was he under stress? We all are. Anything unusual lately? Behavior? Meetings? She hesitated. He'd been more quiet. He requested more reports. Private ones. About what? Internal account summaries. Legacy client structures. I leaned in slightly. Does the term Vestal 17 mean anything to you? This time. She did flinch. Slight, but unmistakable. Eyes blinked faster. One hand rose to her necklace, then fell. No, she said. Too fast. Are you sure? She stood and walked to the window. The lilies bent in a shaft of light. She didn't turn. The only time I've ever seen that name, it was in a note. A burned note. Go on. 3 lines. Typed. No signature. Vestal 17 confirmed. Adjust by end of month. Clean ledger or else. Howard read it. Tore. It. Burned it. When? 3 days before he died. And he said nothing. He told me to forget it. That if anyone asked, I'd never seen it. But you didn't forget. No. She turned. He also told me he'd written to Nero Wolfe. I raised a brow. Did he? Yes. He showed me the envelope. Said he'd already sent it. I nodded, handing her Wolfe's card. She looked at it. Her eyes softened slightly. I was hoping he had, she said, because someone here is hiding something and I'm not sure who. Any suspects? No names, but files vanished. Memos appeared. People got quiet. Trask? She nodded. He got very quiet. I'll speak with him. She handed me a slip of paper. An address. If you need more, come after hours. I rose. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Her voice had gone low. I stepped out into the hall. Julian Trask's nameplate hung beside the compliance door. Neat, unassuming. I knocked, heard a muffled acknowledgement. Entered. The room smelled of carbon paper and anxiety. Rows of filing cabinets, one under us, flickering bulb. Trask looked up. Narrow man, tortoise-shell glasses, nervous hands. Yes? Archibald Graham. Financial Digest. Mr. Dole said you might help. He blinked. I'm not authorized. Just background. About Langley? Yes. He was precise. Hard to read. Did he request any files recently? Some legacy client lists. Any connected to a term like Vestal? He froze. No. You're certain? Yes, I leaned against the filing cabinet. You sure you want to lie to a man who already knows the answer? He turned pale. I don't know what it means, he said at last. It's just a code. It appeared in margin notes, then vanished. Who else saw it? I don't know. What happens when a client code appears and doesn't match a name? We flag it, report it. To who? To Dole. Or Langley. And this one? It was never flagged. Why not? He looked up, and for a moment, the fear cracked through. Because Langley told me not to, and now he's dead. He nodded. I stepped out into the hall, walked to the elevator, punched the ground floor. 3 names, 3 interviews, 1 lie, each. Dole deflected. Remington remembered. Trask recoiled. By the time I hit the pavement, the sun had slipped behind a bank tower. Manhattan had begun its metallic yawn. Streetcars, murmured footsteps, umbrellas opening. I turned up my collar and headed home, back to Wolfe. The sidewalk on West 35th was damp, the kind of damp that didn't come from rain, but from the tired lungs of Manhattan sighing through the gutters. My shoes left dark half-moons on the pavement as I turned the corner toward the brownstone. The street lamp outside flickered once and held. It was late, not by the clock, but by Wolfe's standards. I'd stretched the afternoon at Harriman & Co. and taken a detour through 3 different record offices. My coat collar was up. My cigarette was done, and I had 3 pages of scribbled notes in my inside pocket that told me less than the look on Ava Remington's face had. That's when I saw him, a man in a trench coat, dark, broad-shouldered, crouched low against the wrought-iron fence that surrounded Wolfe's fortress of solitude. He wasn't a drunk, and he wasn't lost. His hands were up near the fence post, and one of his shoes was on the lowest bar. I moved fast, down the steps, into the shadows. He climbed like a man who'd done it before, and regretted it later. That's when I saw the gloves. Red, not brown, not black. Red, like blood in a snowdrift. Like someone had mistaken a pair of opera gloves for housebreaking attire. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I let the gate creak just loud enough to make him flinch. Then I stepped forward. "Don't move." He froze. One foot still on the iron, one arm caught between poses. He turned his head. His face was pale, sharp, unfamiliar. 30, maybe. Clean jaw, clean eyes, not clean hands. "I'm going to assume," I said, "that you aren't here delivering saffron." He slid off the fence and stood, calm but ready to bolt. "This is private property," he said. "You don't say." He reached into his coat, fast, but not fast enough. I stepped in, caught the wrist, twisted. Something metal clattered to the bricks. A thin flashlight, not a weapon, not yet. I pinned his arm and pushed him back toward the gate. "I don't like strangers," I said. "Wolfe hates them. So you've earned a full reception." The bell at the door rang. 3 seconds later, a second chime. Fritz's signal from the vestibule. I grinned. "He won't open it," I said. "You'll wait." The man tried to twist again. I elbowed him gently, a reminder, and pushed him toward the stoop. "I've got a better idea," I said. "You're coming inside, but not the way you planned." He didn't speak. I rang once. Fritz's voice came cool and proper from the box near the door. "Yes, Mr. Goodwin, I've got a visitor." "A guest?" "No, a fence climber, possibly with expensive taste in gloves." A pause. "Mr. Wolfe?" A beat, then Wolfe's voice, clipped and low. "Bring him." I shoved the man forward, up the steps, and into the vestibule. Fritz stood behind the door, arms folded. He stepped aside without a word as I pushed our new friend inside. The brownstone smelled of roast onions and justice. I marched him through the hall, past the grandfather clock, and into the office. Wolfe didn't rise. Of course not. He sat in, his yellow chair like he'd been poured into it by a patient sculptor. The red guest chairs were empty. The orchid shelves in the corner glowed like jungle royalty. The light from the desk lamp made everything warm but not welcoming. "Name?" Wolfe said. The man didn't answer. I gave him a little prod. "Chet Parlow," he said. "Occupation? Independent auditor. By whom retained? Anonymous client. Nature of engagement? Document recovery." Wolfe's lips moved like he was chewing a lemon rind. "Mr. Parlow," he said, "do not insult me. This house is not a hedge fund, and our fences are not open invitations." Parlow swallowed. His gloves were still on. Wolfe noticed. "Remove those." Parlow hesitated, then did. His hands were smooth, long fingers. No ink, no dirt. But his left thumb bore the callus of a man who wrote a great deal and erased even more. Wolfe leaned back. "Mr. Goodwin, sit." "I did." "Mr. Parlow," Wolfe continued, "you attempted entry to my premises, uninvited, under cover of dusk, with no appointment, explanation, or legal authority. What documents precisely were you instructed to recover?" Parlow looked at me, then back to Wolfe. "I was told to retrieve a red ledger, leather-bound, clasped, possibly marked with an insignia. Was it to be stolen or borrowed?" "I wasn't told." "Was the employer male?" "I don't know." Contact method? A drop letter. Typed. No return. Location of drop? Mailbox on Lexington. Compensation? $1,000. Wolfe raised a brow. A paltry sum for felony trespass. Parlow said nothing. Were you armed? No. Have you attempted entry before? No. I leaned forward. Why gloves? Parlow met my eyes. I don't leave fingerprints. Habit. Wolfe's gaze narrowed. Have you worked for Harriman & Co. before? Parlow paused. Once. 10 months ago. What was the engagement? A quarterly audit. Cross-checking tax filings against internal reports. Access? Full. Temporary badge. Files only. Did you encounter the name Vestal 17? This time Parlow blinked. Fast. No. You hesitated. I didn't recognize it. You hesitated, Wolfe repeated. Parlow took a breath. It's not a client. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Then what is it? Parlow looked down. His voice was lower. It was a catch bin, an internal ghost code for untraceable transfers. Used by, I don't know, benefiting whom? No idea. Do not waste my time. Parlow straightened. Look, all I know is, it's a plug. When the numbers don't align, they shift things to Vestal 17. Then they realign later. I tapped my pen. Used often? No, only in high-risk quarters. 2 or 3 times a year, maybe. And Langley? I think he found out. Did he confront anyone? No idea, but someone thought he would. Wolfe shifted his bulk forward. Who wants the ledger now? Parlow gave a tired smile. That's the question, isn't it? Wolfe gestured. Mr. Goodwin. Retrieve the ledger. I rose, crossed to the safe, and returned with it. The red leather caught the light like lacquered blood. I placed it on the desk. Parlow's eyes moved once across it. No flicker of greed, only tension. Wolfe tapped the spine. This object. This was worth $1,000 and a possible charge of trespassing. I'm guessing it's worth more to someone else. Wolfe opened the ledger slowly, flipped 3 pages, landed on 21. He pointed. That line. You've seen it before? Parlow looked. Yes. Explain. It's a round trip. Funds moved to a temporary entity, then back again, obscuring their source. Why? To erase origin, or hide recipient. Could it be traced? Not easily. Is it legal? Parlow blinked. No. I folded my arms. So who? Sent you? Parlow stared at the floor. Whoever sent me doesn't want this in Wolfe's house. Wolfe looked pleased, in a deadly kind of way. Then they are already too late. He closed the ledger. You will not be prosecuted, for now. Mr. Goodwin will take your address, and, if you leave town, I will know. Parlow nodded. Slowly, Wolfe waved a hand. Fritz will see you out. Fritz had appeared, as if summoned by the scent of confession. Parlow stood, walked out slowly. I followed, scribbled his address, and watched the door close behind him. Then I turned back. Wolfe was already reading. I sat down again. Well, I said, he climbs like a cat, talks like a man with a mortgage, and lies like someone who doesn't want to die before next Thursday. Wolfe didn't look up. He is not our killer. No, but he was sent by someone who is. I leaned back. And Vestal 17? Wolfe closed the ledger. It is the hole in the wall, and someone is about to fall through it. The red ledger lay open on Wolfe's desk, its spine creased at page 21. Its inked columns glowing under the banker's lamp like confession in code. I'd seen ledgers before. Crisp ones, messy ones, doctored ones. But this one had a heartbeat. The numbers felt off, even when they aligned. Too balanced, too perfect. Like a man smiling in court. Wolfe's forefinger hovered just above. A margin notation. He didn't touch the paper. Never did, unless he meant to. His brow was low. His breath deep. His eyes following the same 3 lines again and again, like a man rereading the same sentence in a death letter. Fritz had brought coffee, 2 cups. Wolfe hadn't touched his. That alone told me something had spoiled. I was across the room, in the red armchair nearest the globe. Not in the way, just close enough to hand him another page if he gestured. But he didn't. Not yet. The entry is false, Wolfe said. I let the silence hang for a beat. Falsified. Yes. Which part? He didn't look up. All of it. The amount is divisible by 11, a classic hallmark of synthetic balancing. The client ID is assigned to an inactive internal ledger, and the transfer line routes through a closed brokerage subsidiary, defunct since '41. So it's a dummy. It's a lie. A financial fib. But the implications are substantive. I leaned forward. Walk me through it. Wolfe tapped the column. Here. Vestal 17. An internal code. No corresponding client. No external verification. The funds listed were routed through Harriman Holdings Limited, a shell used for internal mergers. However, that firm no longer exists. Was it absorbed? No. It was liquidated. He flipped one page. Here is the second lie. The note that this balance was tied to merger consolidation is fictitious. There was no merger. I frowned. So they cooked the books? Wolfe's mouth tightened. They built a false entry to conceal movement of funds. The amount is small, $5,000, but the frequency is notable. How many times? 9. Across. 3/4. That's a lot of symmetry for sloppy embezzling. Indeed. Which implies structure. He reached for a secondary sheet, one of his own, hand-drawn, lines, connections, symbols, a chart of names, dates, and initials, and right in. The center, V17. I nodded toward it. You think Langley was building that? I believe he stumbled across it. He told Ava Remington he'd seen something that didn't add up. Yes, this. And he wrote to you. Yes. I stood, pacing once to the window. So Langley finds the false ledger entry. Figures. Out someone's running internal funds through a ghost account. Vestal 17. Hints to his assistant. Then ends up face down in his brandy. Wolfe gave a slow nod. Precisely. Do we know the origin of the transfers? No. Recipient? No. Purpose? No. I sighed. You're enjoying this. I enjoy precision, he said. That was when the phone rang. I crossed and picked it up. Nero Wolfe's. Residence, a familiar growl answered. Put him on. Good morning to you too, Inspector. Goodwin. Now. I covered the receiver. Wolfe. Kramer. Wolfe scowled but extended his hand. I passed the receiver. Wolfe, he said, flat, as butcher paper. There was a pause. Wolfe's eyes didn't move. Then, yes, another pause. I expected as much. And another. Tell your coroner his delay was excessive. He listened a final beat. Yes, I will call you if necessary. He handed the phone back to me. I returned it to its cradle. Confirmed? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Cyanide, orally administered. Wine glass? Yes, I exhaled. So no hanging, no gas, no dramatics. No, and no suicide. Why not? Wolfe gestured. Langley left no note, no confession, no witness. His body was found at midnight, seated, brandy unfinished with no sign of struggle. Yet the concentration of cyanide was higher than would result from self-administered dosage. Could he have built tolerance? No. That would imply intent, which returns us to motive, which we don't have. We do, Wolfe said. He intended to expose someone. I nodded toward the ledger. Because of this. Yes. And someone got to him first. Wolfe nodded once, then looked at me. We need Claudia Langley. I moved to the phone, dialed the number on the card she'd left. 3 rings. Then her voice. Langley residence. Mrs. Langley. Archie Goodwin. Yes? Wolfe would like you to visit. There was a pause. I can be there in an hour. Wolfe nodded. She will come. I hung up. An hour later, Fritz opened the door, only after I'd confirmed the bell. Claudia stepped inside, dressed in charcoal wool and wrapped in something, too tasteful to call a veil. She looked tired, but clean tired, not broken. We led her into the office. She sat in the red chair. Wolfe didn't greet her. He opened the ledger. Madam, he said, your husband discovered a fraud. She didn't blink. Then he was right. Yes. Vestal 17 is a laundering conduit. It was designed to reclassify internal funds under the pretense of merger realignment. But no merger occurred. She looked down. Then he died for that. Possibly. Wolfe tapped the page. Who would benefit from false mergers? She looked up. Anyone with stakes in the subsidiary shell. Who had stakes? Dole, Trask, and... She stopped. Ava. Wolfe nodded. A 3-legged stool. Remove one, the others fall. She was his assistant, Claudia said. But more. Romantically? I don't know. Then what? She knew more than she said, and she wanted him quiet. Wolfe looked to me. Archie. Yes? Get me the Harriman transfer. Documents for Q2 through Q4 of last year. I blinked. That's 20 boxes. You'll manage. Where? Harriman Records. I sighed. Fine. What am I looking for? Anything referencing Vestal, consolidation, or line items divisible by 11. You know how much bourbon I'll need after this? An unconscionable amount. Claudia stood. Mr. Wolfe, if you're right, someone killed Howard for this. I want names. You shall have them, but not yet. When? When they attempt to do it again. She blinked. You think this isn't over? No, Wolfe said. It's just begun. She nodded quietly and left. I looked at Wolfe. You really think they'll try again? They must. Why? Because there's still money missing. And he turned back to the ledger. The rain had begun some time before dawn, a fine, steady fall that slicked the city's stones and turned the air to paste. By 10, the brownstone had settled into its usual rhythms. Fritz preparing lunch in silence, Wolfe buried in ledgers, and me updating my notes in the red chair like a man trying to thread a needle with a blindfold on. Then the doorbell rang. All looked up. Wolfe didn't move. He hated interruptions, particularly before lunch, especially from the law. A second ring. Short, sharp, familiar. I stood and walked to the vestibule. I didn't need a peephole to know who it was. Only one man in New York rang that way, like the button owed him money. I cracked the door. Morning, Inspector. Kramer stood on the stoop, his coat dripping, his cigar unlit but damp enough to qualify as nautical equipment. His hat brim was flat with water. Cut the charm, Goodwin. Always a pleasure. He stepped inside without waiting. I led him through the hallway, past Fritz's quiet orbit, and into the office. Wolfe didn't rise. Inspector Kramer, he said, voice even. Kramer didn't answer. He took the red chair across from Wolfe, shrugged off his coat, and dropped it on the arm like he was claiming territory. Then he reached into his pocket and produced a small envelope. Autopsy's back. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. And? Cyanide, Kramer said. High dose. Ingested. Confirmed. Wolfe nodded. Langley did not take his own life. No, Kramer agreed. He didn't. He tapped the envelope on his knee. But that's not why I'm here. Why then? Wolfe asked. Kramer opened the envelope and pulled out a black and white photo. He laid it on the desk, facing Wolfe. Partial print. From the wineglass. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Not far, just enough. Match? Not Langley's, Kramer said. And not staff, but clear. Whose? We don't know yet. Wolfe nodded once. Kramer looked at me. You've been busy. I tend to be, I said. Idle hands and all that. Cut it. Wolfe raised a hand. Inspector, he said, have you considered the internal financial structure of Harriman and Co.? Kramer grunted. I've considered the fact that Langley's ledger is missing, his widow is evasive, and Wolfe is once again in possession of evidence he hasn't shared. Wolfe's mouth moved. Slightly. The ledger is not missing. Kramer blinked. What? Wolfe tapped the drawer beside him. Recovered by Mr. Goodwin. It has not left the house. Kramer's face darkened. You sat on it. I examined it. Kramer leaned forward. I could have you on obstruction. Wolfe didn't flinch. You could attempt it. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Are you enjoying this? No. Then why withhold? I do not withhold, Wolfe said. I deduce. Kramer rose, walked once around the chair. The office was warm, but he hadn't unbuttoned his coat. That was the signal. He wasn't staying. You find anything? He asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Well? Wolfe paused. Do you recall the subsidiary firm Harriman Holdings? Kramer nodded. Shell company. Folded in 41. Not folded, Wolfe corrected. Absorbed, then reused, on paper, to mask internal fund shifts. 3 transfers, all marked under the name Vestal 17. Kramer stopped pacing. That's the name Remington mentioned. Yes. She said Langley had burned a memo. He did. And? Wolfe lifted the ledger. Open to page 21. He turned the book toward Kramer. See here. Kramer peered down. Wolfe tapped a line with his thumb. The amount is divisible by 11. A signal of manipulation. The root lists an inactive account, and the line item includes a merger note that is unsubstantiated. Kramer straightened. So someone was moving money inside the firm? Yes. To who? That, Wolfe said, remains unclear. Yet you have the ledger. I have fragments. Kramer exhaled through his nose. You think Langley found this? I do. You think he threatened someone? I believe he intended to. And someone got ahead of him. Precisely. Kramer turned away, stared at the orchid shelf. The blooms leaned under the lamplight, oblivious. He turned back. I need the ledger. No. Kramer's mouth twitched. Wolfe. No, Wolfe repeated. You may examine it here, with supervision. It will not leave this room. Why? Because, Wolfe said, if the person who killed Langley learns the police have it, they may alter course, and I need them predictable. Kramer considered. Do you have suspects? Yes. Names? No. Kramer sat again. If you know who did it, he said, and you don't tell me, you will have me on obstruction. Damn right. Wolfe folded his hands. I will tell you when I know. Not before. That's not how this works. It is how this works. They stared at each other. Not long. Long enough. Kramer stood. You're playing a game. No, Wolfe said. I'm ending one. Kramer picked up his coat. I want a full list. Every person Langley named. Every transfer. Everything you've got. You'll have it. When? When it's ready. Kramer shoved the coat under his arm and moved toward the door. He paused once. If you get someone killed, he said, I'll bury you in paperwork. Wolfe didn't respond. Kramer left. I waited. Wolfe sipped his coffee. It was cold. I looked over. Well, he's angry, Wolfe said. Is he right? Yes. I reached for my pen. Let's make him angrier, I said. Wolfe smiled. A small one. But it was there. The subpoenas weren't real, but the reactions were. I had them printed on thick cream stock, the kind you'd use for a judge's funeral or a governor's blackmail. Wolfe dictated the language himself, formal but vague, signed in tight fountain pen scrawl. 3 envelopes, one for each name that mattered. Sherman Dole, Ava Remington, and Julian Trask. They went out by courier on Friday morning, just before 9. By noon, the cracks began to show. I started with Trask, his secretary, a freckled redhead, with patience like a bomb fuse. Called to say he had stepped out mid-morning and hadn't returned. His desk was locked. His coat was still on the chair. At 1:30, Remington fainted in the hallway of Harriman & Co., just outside the compliance office. A junior associate caught her before she hit marble. According to the building nurse, she came to quickly, but refused to be moved to a hospital, said it was just nerves. Declined to say more. By 4, Dole was gone. Not absent. Not out. Gone. The receptionist said he'd left for lunch at exactly 12:30, wearing his brown fedora and grey scarf. Never came back. Calls to his apartment went unanswered. He didn't appear at his usual supper club. His car was still parked where he'd left it. I returned to the brownstone at dusk, damp and tired. Wolfe was in the office. The ledger was on the desk, open to page 21. He hadn't moved for hours. They've begun, I said. He looked up. All 3. Trask fled. Remington folded. Dole vanished. Good. Good. He pointed to the window. Rain blurred the pane. The weakest scaffolds collapse first. That leaves weight at the center. I hope you're not calling Remington a scaffold. She is a bearing beam, Mr. Goodwin. She just doesn't know it. I poured a brandy. Wolfe didn't ask what Trask had left behind. He didn't need to. We both knew he wouldn't run unless he had something to run from, or someone to run from. At 10:30 that night, the phone rang. It was the Midtown precinct. A man had been found in an alley off West 49th, bruised and bloody, but conscious. Claimed his name was Sherman Dole. Wanted a lawyer, or Wolfe. I gave them our address. Half an hour later, I was in a squad car headed north. Dole was sitting up on a cot, his coat torn, blood down his collar, left eye purpling like a plum that lost a fight with a bottle. He looked up as I stepped inside the room. You, he said. Yes, I said. Me. You sent that envelope. I did. You trying to get me killed? No, I said. But you might help me prevent someone else from joining the trend. He looked away. They knew. Who? He coughed. It hurt him. The ones running the accounts. Vestal 17. It was never Langley's game. He didn't build it. No. He inherited it. From who? I don't know. But he knew. Dole nodded. He said he'd found the route. Something buried deep, files older than he was. And you. I tried to warn him, told him not to push, but he did. Yes. He told me he was going to out them. He said, I'll make them crawl out of their marble dens and explain it. And now he's dead. Yes. I stood. Come with me. I'm not done here. You are if I say you are. The officer by the door shrugged. I signed him out. 30 minutes later, we walked into the brownstone. Fritz opened the door. Wolfe was still in the office. Dole walked like a man who'd been through one too many truths. He sat in the red chair and touched his temple. Wolfe didn't greet him. You were beaten. Yes. Where? West 49th. By whom? I don't know. What did they say? Nothing. Then how do you know it was about Vestal? Because the first thing they said after the first punch was, keep your mouth shut about V17. Wolfe nodded. Then you know you've already said too much. Dole laughed. It cracked like ice. I don't care. Wolfe leaned forward. Who ran the books? I told you, I don't know. Then who gave access? Dole hesitated. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Mr. Dole. He swallowed. Julian Trask. Wolfe closed the ledger. He held the keys. Yes. Was he acting alone? No. Wolfe nodded. Then he's next. I rose. Should I find him? Wolfe looked at me. No. He'll come to us. Why? Because the panic has begun. He'll think this house is safe. And is it? For now, Wolfe said. At that moment the phone rang. I picked it up. Goodwin. A pause. Then a voice. Low. Cracked. Don't let them kill me. Trask? Yes. Where are you? A whispered breath. Lexington, 68th. Phone booth. I turned to Wolfe. He nodded. Bring him. I spoke into the phone. Stay there. He didn't answer. By the time I reached the booth, he was pacing. Rain dripped from his hat brim. His overcoat was soaked. His tie was crooked. His hand trembled as he climbed into the cab. He didn't speak. When we entered the brownstone, Wolfe didn't rise. Trask looked at Dole and nearly backed out the door. He's not dead, he whispered. No, Wolfe said. You are not so lucky. Trask sat, carefully. I didn't start it, he said. Wolfe folded his hands. Then who did? I don't know. Try. Trask leaned forward. There was a file. Years ago. Before I joined. Something buried. Reclassified. It kept showing up. Vestal 17. But the amounts, they grew. Langley. He caught it. He followed the trail. And you. I helped. Willingly. At first, no. Then, he made sense. He said they'd bury it forever if we didn't move. Wolfe nodded. Who else knew? Ava. She said nothing. She was afraid. Of? Being blamed. She should be. Trask closed his eyes. I can give you the documents. You will. And immunity? No, Wolfe said. But I can give you a chance. Trask wept. Softly. It was hard to watch. Wolfe didn't blink. The case had broken, but the rot was just beginning to show. The envelope arrived at 9:07. No postage, no seal, no name. Just thick ivory stock, creased once down the middle and folded like it didn't want to be opened. Fritz found it tucked between the milk bottles on the back stoop. He brought it in, placed it silently on the corner of Wolfe's desk, and stepped away like it might contain dynamite or strawberries. Wolfe glanced at it once, then twice. He didn't touch it until the orchids had been seen to, the first cup of coffee taken, and the ledger closed. That took 19 minutes. I counted. When Wolfe finally opened it, he used the flat of a butter knife, sliding beneath the fold like a surgeon probing an artery. The photograph inside slid out without resistance. Wolfe didn't react. His face remained unreadable, but he didn't breathe for at least 5 seconds. I looked over his shoulder. 2 people stood beside a sedan, mid-frame, under the shadow of a wide oak. Claudia Langley, unmistakable, her posture formal, her mouth relaxed. And next to her, Julian Trask, younger, perhaps, no glasses. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder. A candid pose, but not accidental. I leaned back in my chair. That's cozy, I said. Wolfe didn't answer. He placed the photograph beside the ledger, then turned it clockwise, studying every corner. The edges were worn. A faint smudge on the left margin, dated April 1941, upstate New York. Fritz returned a moment later with the breakfast tray, a porcelain plate with 2 slices of cherry toast, warm, crisped, and glowing faintly under the dome. He poured the coffee without prompting, then exited without a word. Wolfe didn't touch the plate. He stared at it, then at the photo, then back at the plate. And then, slowly, he spoke. She lied. I raised an eyebrow. Claudia, she told me she did not know Trask personally, that their acquaintance was limited to boardrooms. She said they shared no history, and that picture says otherwise. She didn't hire me to solve a murder, Wolfe said, eyes still fixed on the photo. She hired me to aim the blame. I stood, circled the desk, and took the photograph gently. She's not stupid, I said. No, Wolfe agreed. But she is desperate. Maybe both. Perhaps. I studied the photo again. Do we know who took it? No, but they knew it mattered. Yes, and wanted us to know it. Wolfe's voice dropped half an octave. Someone wants her implicated, or warned. He nodded once tightly. The toast remained untouched. I lifted the dome. The smell filled the office. Warm fruit, faint almond. Wolfe winced. The reaction involuntary. Too soon, I asked. Too symbolic, he replied. We didn't speak again for 5 minutes. Then Wolfe reached for the phone. I watched him dial Claudia's number. The exchange rang twice before she answered. Mrs. Langley, Wolfe said. This is Nero Wolfe. A pause. No, you did not. But I have a matter to clarify. Another pause. Her voice, tight and low, was just audible from where I stood. Yes, Wolfe said. I believe you should see it. A longer pause. Within the hour. He hung up. She's coming, he said. Any guess how she'll explain it? Poorly. When Claudia Langley arrived, Fritz opened the door without speaking. She wore black again, not mourning black, but the calculated elegance of someone rehearsed in grief. Her gloves were suede, her lipstick subtle. She moved through the house like it owed her nothing. I led her to the office. Wolfe didn't rise. She sat, straight-backed, knees crossed. He placed the photograph on the desk. She didn't reach for it. I suppose I should pretend to be surprised, she said. You may do as you like, Wolfe replied. She looked down at her gloves. Where did it come from? It was left anonymously. She nodded slowly. I thought it might surface eventually. Then it is real. Yes. You denied knowing Mr. Trask. I denied knowing him now. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Explain. She sighed. We met in 1939. He was working as an intern under my father. I was still in university. Romantic? Yes. Serious? Not anymore. That isn't the question. She looked him in the eye. It was serious. Did Langley know? Yes. When? Before we married. And after. He never mentioned it again. Was he jealous? No. Not in the way you mean. Wolfe tapped the photograph. This was taken 3 years ago. Yes. Long after your marriage began. Yes. You told me you had no reason to protect Trask. I lied. Why? She hesitated. Because if he did it, if Julian killed Howard, I didn't want to know. You still don't? No. Silence filled the room like water in a vault. Then Wolfe leaned back. Why hire me? I thought you'd prove it wasn't Julian. Even if it was? Yes. Then you misjudged me. She looked down. Everyone misjudges you. That's why you're good. Wolfe didn't respond. She stood. Will you turn this over to the police? No. Why not? Because I haven't decided yet what it means. And when you do, I will act accordingly. She nodded once, then left. The photograph stayed on the desk. The toast had gone cold. Wolfe didn't touch it. The photograph remained on the corner of Wolfe's desk, untouched, yet omnipresent. Archie, arms folded, leaned against the archway of the office, eyeing. The envelope beside it, cream-coloured, anonymous, but decisively placed. The image it carried had disrupted the morning's rhythm like a hairline crack in porcelain. Small, subtle, and irrevocably dangerous. Claudia Langley, once a portrait of composed widowhood, smiled in the picture beside Julian Trask. The smile was genuine. The setting, a garden party perhaps, bespoke summer, privilege, and something private. Wolfe, for all his grand dismissals of sentimentality, studied it longer than he'd admit. He did not touch his cherry toast. Fritz's attempts had included Amarena cherries and even a whisper of hazelnut butter. Nothing moved Wolfe's fork. This photo, Archie ventured, wasn't snapped in secret. It's too posed. Wolfe grunted. Obvious. Archie shifted his weight. That means someone close to them. Someone with access. Or with purpose. Wolfe replied. There is no value in the image unless it introduces doubt. Well, it's introduced mine. That, Archie, is not its triumph. Its triumph lies in its timing. Wolfe gestured to the envelope again. Anonymous delivery, he said, is not anonymity. It's performance. Archie stepped into the room, hands in his pockets. You think the photo's genuine? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Would a forged image require this delicacy? No. A fabrication would come with leverage, not ambiguity. This was a whisper, not a shove. Archie let out a breath, low and even. She's lied. Yes, Wolfe said. And we must now decide if she lies by habit or by strategy. A faint chime from the hall drew Archie's attention. Fritz, ever punctual, delivered coffee with a precision befitting a military parade. Not a word passed between him and Wolfe. He placed the tray gently, bowed slightly, and departed like a phantom. Wolfe reached for his cup but did not sip. I want the photograph dusted, he said, but not by Saul. Archie's brow lifted. You don't trust Saul. I trust Saul to follow instruction. I do not trust him to forget what he sees. Archie shrugged. Lon Cohen, then? Wolfe frowned. Too gossipy. Fred Durkin. He's clumsy, but discreet. Archie nodded. I'll take it over now. Wolfe nodded once, slowly, then fixed Archie with a steady gaze. And Archie. Yes? Do not let Fred keep the original longer than required. I want it back. Afraid of losing a souvenir? Wolfe did not reply. Outside, the sky had turned a jaundiced grey, clouds hanging low and indecisive over Manhattan. Archie walked fast. He cut across 35th Street, avoiding the corner where a fruit cart spilled loud curses into the morning. Fred met him at a diner near 8th Avenue, already cradling a chipped mug of something brown and steaming. He squinted at the photograph through bifocals. Fancy dame, he said. She's a widow, Archie replied. Be polite, Fred whistled. So's my Aunt Nellie. She doesn't look like this. Archie slid the envelope across the table. I want prints, dusted. Tell me if there's anything odd on the surface. I want it fast. I want it quiet. Fred pocketed the image. You got it. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe remained statuesque. The toast had cooled to a reluctant surrender on the plate. I've made a decision, he said as Archie hung up his coat. On what? Claudia Langley did not engage me to uncover the truth. Archie's voice was flat. No? No. She engaged me to construct one. He folded his hands on his stomach. I was meant to walk the perimeter of her design, not pierce its heart. Archie sat. You think she wants Trask buried? I think, Wolfe said. She needs someone else held responsible. The doorbell rang. Fritz did not move. Wolfe gestured. Archie rose. At the front door stood Claudia Langley. She was dressed in charcoal grey, simple and creased like a sealed envelope. Her gloves were ivory. Her gaze was undiminished. Mr. Goodwin, she said. May I come in? Archie stepped aside. She did not remove her gloves. In the office, she paused before sitting, waiting for Wolfe to acknowledge her. He didn't. She sat anyway. There's news, she said. I imagine so, Wolfe said without warmth. Claudia reached into her bag and removed a folded newspaper. They've printed the coroner's update. Cyanide, Wolfe murmured. As expected. Claudia tilted her head. You're not surprised. I'm not. She hesitated. You've learned something, she said. I have. Claudia's fingers twitched inside her gloves. Then you know, she said, that my husband didn't kill himself. Wolfe gazed at her. Yes. A beat passed. And you know, she continued, voice softening, that someone inside that firm had motive. Wolfe didn't blink. I know that someone inside that firm had opportunity. Motive remains elusive. Claudia's composure frayed slightly. I brought you everything I had, she said. I was honest. No, Wolfe said calmly. You were precise. She stiffened. There is a difference, he continued. Precision can disguise. Honesty cannot. Claudia's hand hovered over her purse. What are you accusing me of? I am not accusing, Wolfe said. I am acknowledging. He reached beside his chair and retrieved the photograph. He held it aloft. Claudia's face went white. Where did you get that? Someone who wants you vulnerable. Her lips parted. It's old. That is irrelevant, Wolfe said. It was nothing. Julian and I, that was before. Before what? Before Langley. Before the firm. Wolfe tapped the photograph with a single finger. Then why conceal it? Claudia said nothing. Archie studied her. The stillness in her expression was not fear. It was calculation. I knew it would complicate things, she said finally. I didn't think it mattered. Wolfe's voice was dry. Your capacity to measure what matters is impressive. I came to you for help. You came to me for direction. You wished the weapon pointed, not examined. Claudia stood. Wolfe made no motion. Mr. Wolfe, she said, I've told you everything I can. He looked up. No, he said. You've told me everything you must. She turned and left without another word. The door clicked closed. Archie turned to Wolfe. Well, she'll return. You sure? Guilt is a dull blade. But miscalculation, that cuts quickly. He returned the photograph to its envelope and set it beside the untouched toast. Have you eaten? Not yet. Then do. Wolfe reached for the bell and summoned Fritz. Order must resume, he said, even when appetite fails. 3 hours later the phone rang. Archie answered. Fred's voice was muffled. Prince came up odd. How odd? There are 2 sets, Fred said. Both partial. Neither match Claudia. Archie stiffened. Anyone we know? One match hit a background file from Albany. Government contractor. Ex-bookkeeper. Quiet guy. Worked audit trails for the state treasury. Name's Parlow. Archie's stomach dropped. Chet Parlow? Yeah. Archie hung up. He strode to the office. Wolfe, he said. We've been revisited. Wolfe's eyebrow rose. Parlow's prints are on the photo. Wolfe folded his hands. Then our auditor's hands are not only busy, they're dangerous. Archie nodded. I'll get Saul to trail him. I studied the photo again. Do we know who took it? No. But they knew it mattered. Yes. And wanted us to know it. Wolfe's voice dropped half an octave. Someone wants her implicated. Or warned. He nodded once, tightly. The toast remained untouched. I lifted the dome. The smell filled the office. Warm fruit, faint almond. Wolfe winced. The reaction involuntary. Too soon? I asked. Too symbolic, he replied. We didn't speak again for 5 minutes. Then, Wolfe reached for the phone. I watched him dial Claudia's number. The exchange rang twice before she answered. Mrs. Langley, Wolfe said. This is Nero Wolfe. A pause. No, you did not. But I have a matter to clarify. Another pause. Her voice, tight and low, was just audible from where I stood. Yes, Wolfe said. I believe you should see it. A longer pause. Within the hour. He hung up. She's coming, he said. Any guess how she'll explain it? Poorly. When Claudia Langley arrived, Fritz opened the door without speaking. She wore black again, not mourning black, but the calculated elegance of someone rehearsed in grief. Her gloves were suede, her lipstick subtle. She moved through, the house like it owed her nothing. I led her to the office. Wolfe didn't rise. She sat straight-backed, knees crossed. He placed the photograph on the desk. She didn't reach for it. I suppose I should pretend to be surprised, she said. You may do as you like, Wolfe replied. She looked down at her gloves. Where did it come from? It was left anonymously. She nodded, slowly. I thought it might surface eventually. Then it is real. Yes, you denied knowing Mr. Trask. I denied knowing him now. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Explain, she sighed. We met in 1939. He was working as an intern under my father. I was still in university. Romantic? Yes. Serious? Not anymore. That isn't the question. She looked him in the eye. It was serious. Did Langley know? Yes. When? Before we married. And after? He never mentioned it again. Was he jealous? No. Not in the way you mean. Wolfe tapped the photograph. This was taken 3 years ago. Yes. Long. After your marriage began. Yes. You told me you had no reason to protect Trask. I lied. Why? She hesitated. Because if he did it, if Julian killed Howard, I didn't want to know. You still don't. No. Silence filled the room like water in a vault. Then Wolfe leaned back. Why hire me? I thought you'd prove it wasn't Julian. Even if it was. Yes. Then you misjudged me. She looked down. Everyone misjudges you. That's why you're good. Wolfe didn't respond. She stood. Will you turn this over to the police? No. Why not? Because I haven't decided yet what it means. And when you do, I will act accordingly. She nodded once, then left. The photograph stayed on the desk. The toast had gone cold. Wolfe didn't touch it. The photograph remained on the corner of Wolfe's desk, untouched, yet omnipresent. Archie, arms folded, leaned against the archway of the office, eyeing the envelope beside it. Cream-colored, anonymous, but decisively placed. The image it carried had disrupted the morning's rhythm like a hairline crack in porcelain. Small, subtle, and irrevocably dangerous. Claudia Langley, once a portrait of composed widowhood, smiled in the picture beside Julian Trask. The smile was genuine. The setting, a garden party perhaps, bespoke summer, privilege, and something private. Wolfe, for all his grand dismissals of sentimentality, studied it longer than he'd admit. He did not touch his cherry toast. Fritz's attempts had included Amarena cherries and even a whisper of hazelnut butter. Nothing moved Wolfe's fork. This photo, Archie ventured, wasn't snapped in secret. It's too posed, Wolfe grunted. Obvious. Archie shifted his weight. That means someone close to them, someone with access, or with purpose, Wolfe replied. There is no value in the image unless it introduces doubt. Well, it's introduced mine. That, Archie, is not its triumph. Its triumph lies in its timing. Wolfe gestured to the envelope again. Anonymous delivery, he said, is not anonymity. It's performance. Archie stepped into the room, hands in his pockets. You think the photo's genuine? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Would a forged image require this delicacy? No. A fabrication would come with leverage, not ambiguity. This was a whisper, not a shove. Archie let out a breath, low and even. She's lied. Yes, Wolfe said, and we must now decide if she lies by habit or by strategy. A faint chime from the hall drew Archie's attention. Fritz, ever punctual, delivered coffee with a precision befitting a military parade. Not a word passed between him and Wolfe. He placed the tray gently, bowed slightly, and departed like a phantom. Wolfe reached for his cup, but did not sip. I want the photograph dusted, he said, but not by Saul. Archie's brow lifted. You don't trust Saul. I trust Saul to follow instruction. I do not trust him to forget what he sees. Archie shrugged. Lon Cohen, then? Wolfe frowned. Too gossipy. Fred Durkin. He's clumsy but discreet. Archie nodded. I'll take it over now. Wolfe nodded once, slowly, then fixed Archie with a steady gaze. And Archie. Yes. Do not let Fred keep the original longer than required. I want it back. Afraid of losing a souvenir? Wolfe did not reply. Outside, the sky had turned a jaundiced grey, clouds hanging low and indecisive over Manhattan. Archie walked fast. He cut across 35th Street, avoiding the corner where a fruit cart spilled loud curses into the morning. Fred met him at a diner near 8th Avenue, already cradling a chipped mug of something brown and steaming. He squinted at the photograph through bifocals. Fancy dame, he said. She's a widow, Archie replied. Be polite. Fred whistled. So's my Aunt Nellie. She doesn't look like this. Archie slid the envelope across the table. I want prints. Dusted. Tell me if there's anything odd on the surface. I want it fast. I want it quiet. Fred pocketed the image. You got it. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe remained statuesque. The toast had cooled to a reluctant surrender on the plate. I've made a decision, he said, as Archie hung up. His coat. On what? Claudia Langley did not engage me to uncover the truth. Archie's voice was flat. No. She engaged me to construct one. He folded his hands on his stomach. I was meant to walk the perimeter of her design, not pierce its heart. Archie sat. You think she wants Trask buried? I think, Wolfe said, she needs someone else held responsible. The doorbell rang. Fritz did not move. Wolfe gestured. Archie rose. At the front door stood Claudia Langley. She was dressed in charcoal grey, simple and creased like a sealed envelope. Her gloves were ivory. Her gaze was undiminished. Mr. Goodwin, she said. May I come in? Archie stepped aside. She did not remove her gloves. In the office, she paused before sitting, waiting for Wolfe to acknowledge her. He didn't. She sat anyway. There's news, she said. I imagine so, Wolfe said without warmth. Claudia reached into her bag and removed a folded newspaper. They've printed the coroner's update. Cyanide, Wolfe murmured. As expected. Claudia tilted her head. You're not surprised? I'm not. She hesitated. You've learned something, she said. I have. Claudia's fingers twitched inside her gloves. Then, you know, she said, that my husband didn't kill himself. Wolfe gazed at her. Yes. A beat passed. And you know, she continued, voice softening, that someone inside that firm had motive. Wolfe didn't blink. I know. That someone inside that firm had opportunity. Motive remains elusive. Claudia's composure frayed slightly. I brought you everything I had, she said. I was honest. No, Wolfe said calmly. You were precise. She stiffened. There is a difference, he continued. Precision can disguise. Honesty cannot. Claudia's hand hovered over her purse. What are you accusing me of? I am not accusing, Wolfe said. I am acknowledging. He reached beside his chair and retrieved the photograph. He held it aloft. Claudia's face went white. Where did you get that? Someone who wants you vulnerable. Her lips parted. It's old. That is irrelevant, Wolfe said. It was nothing. Julian and I, that was before. Before what? Before Langley. Before the firm. Wolfe tapped the photograph with a single finger. Then why conceal it? Claudia said nothing. Archie studied her. The stillness in her expression was not fear. It was calculation. I knew it would complicate things, she said finally. I didn't think it mattered. Wolfe's voice was dry. Your capacity to measure what matters is impressive. I came to you for help. You came to me for direction. You wished the weapon pointed, not examined. Claudia stood. Wolfe made no motion. Mr. Wolfe, she said, I've told you everything I can. He looked up. No, he said. You've told me everything you must. She turned and left without another word. The door clicked closed. Archie turned to Wolfe. Well? She'll return. You sure? Guilt is a dull blade, but miscalculation, that cuts quickly. He returned the photograph to its envelope and set it beside the untouched toast. Have you eaten? Not yet. Then do. Wolfe reached for the bell and summoned Fritz. Order must resume, he said, even when appetite fails. 3 hours later, the phone rang. Archie answered. Fred's voice was muffled. Prince came up odd. How odd? There are 2 sets, Fred said. Both partial. Neither match Claudia. Archie stiffened. Anyone we know? One match hit a background file from Albany. Government contractor, ex-bookkeeper. Quiet guy. Worked audit trails for the state treasury. Name's Parlow. Archie's stomach dropped. Chet Parlow? Yeah. Archie hung up. He strode. To the office. Wolfe, he said. We've been revisited. Wolfe's eyebrow rose. Parlow's prints are on the photo. Wolfe folded his hands. Then our auditor's hands are not only busy, they're dangerous. Archie nodded. I'll get Saul to trail him. Carefully, Wolfe said. Parlow is not the man behind the curtain. He is the man handed a script and told never to improvise. Archie moved to the desk. You still think Claudia is lying? Yes. But you think she's not alone? No, Wolfe said, eyes narrowing. Now I think she's not leading. A silence fell, thick as dust. Outside, Manhattan's veins pulsed. The streetlights flickered on like watchful eyes. Wolfe at last spoke. Begin a new file, he said. Label it Vestal. Archie sat at his typewriter. And under that, Wolfe said, write one line. Every account has a master. The rain had washed Manhattan in sepia gloom. I stepped out of the cab and adjusted my hat. The driver didn't wait. He disappeared into the avenue's shadows, tail lights dissolving like doubt in daylight. Julian Trask's building sat on East 54th, respectable, unassuming, and now crawling with the black and silver hum of official presence. A beat cop nodded without warmth. I didn't need introductions. The badge on my lapel was forged, but the look in my eyes was real. Wolfe had sent me. I had the stink of purpose. Inside, the elevator operator was mute. 5th floor. The doors opened with the hush of curtains in. A theatre no one applauded. The hallway reeked faintly of varnish and dread. Apartment 5C's door stood ajar. I pushed through. Julian Trask had chosen a tidy end, or someone had chosen it for him. He was seated, or placed, on the green Chesterfield near the bookshelf. One arm slouched at his side. The other rested on the armrest, fingers still curled. A note sat on the coffee table. Typed. Centered. Too perfect. Detective Lonner glanced up from his crouch. Archie. Didn't expect the Wolfe machine tonight. I'm the rubber belt. Wolfe's the wheel. What have we? He stood, brushing lint from his trousers. Apartment manager heard a thump, checked in, found the scene. Gas was on, windows closed. But the note says cyanide. I moved closer. Typed? Yeah. And his typewriter's on the desk. I walked over. The Remington sat with the authority of a clergyman, ribbon taut and black. I leaned in. The shift key was depressed slightly. Not enough to engage. And the spool wasn't aligned. Whoever had typed the note hadn't noticed the ribbon had snagged. A silent confession, spelled in mechanics. This wasn't his note. Lorna frowned. What makes you say that? Because the ribbon didn't bite. You want a suicide to look real, you test the ribbon tension. Otherwise, the note's blank, even if you typed it with your soul. I crossed to the desk and flipped the drawer. Inside, organized like a banker's dreams, sat files, a fountain, pen, and a thin folder labeled V17. I lifted it. Inside were 2 sheets, copied ledgers, and a name circled in blue pencil. Langley. I returned to the couch and glanced at Trask again. His face was pale but not peaceful. His eyes, half-lidded, looked toward the fireplace, as if expecting warmth and finding none. There was no drink glass nearby, no burned match, no vial. Just the neatness of someone who knew too well what suicide should look like, and forgot how chaos intrudes. I want the body report when it's ready, I said. Lorna nodded. Talk to Kramer. I did better. I returned to the brownstone. By midnight, Fritz opened the door only after confirming it was me through the peephole. His silhouette, formal and alert, was reassurance in a dark world. Mr. Wolfe is still in the office. I stepped in, peeling off the coat. The scent of orchids trailed faintly from the rear rooms, mixing with the aroma of Turkish coffee and Fritz's late roast. Wolfe sat at his desk, mountainous, unmoved. His eyes flicked open as I entered. Well, Trask is dead. Cyanide. Staged to look like suicide. The note was fake. He closed his eyes again. Not sleep. Reflection. And the typewriter. Ribbon wasn't aligned. I'd bet Fritz's cutlery it was done post-mortem. Wolfe's fingers twitched. He did not speak. I placed the V17 file on his desk. He opened it, examined the papers, and sniffed once. These, he said, are dangerous breadcrumbs. He glanced toward the fire, which hadn't been lit. The silence stretched. 2 men dead, I said. No, 1 man and 1 reckoning, Wolfe replied. Langley spoke. Trask almost did. Someone is extinguishing noise. And Claudia, he opened a drawer, took out a paperweight, and set it atop the file. She offered orchids to buy silence, not truth. I nodded. There's something else, I said. Wolfe tilted his head. Trask had Langley's name circled, in a folder marked V17. It was internal, a laundering scheme, the kind that ends in corner offices or graves. Or both, Wolfe murmured. We sat in the stillness. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. Inside, something had shifted. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. I will dine tomorrow at 7. Inform Fritz. Tonight, the air is too bitter. Stood. There's one more thing. His eyes lifted, expectant. Trask looked toward the fireplace. Wolfe's brow furrowed. Nothing was there. He nodded. Then that's where we must look. The morning greeted Manhattan with its usual grimace. Grey, damp, and indifferent. By 8 o'clock, I was back at Trask's building. The doorman gave me a look that said he'd seen too many detectives lately, and none that left tips. 5th floor, he muttered, before I asked. Trask's door still bore the police seal. I didn't need to break it. Lorna had given me quiet clearance, sometimes being Wolfe's errand boy paid in whispered favours. Inside, the air had turned stale. The furniture hadn't moved, but the silence had. It no longer hummed with crime, just the aftertaste of calculation. I returned to the desk. The typewriter sat precisely as I'd left it. I adjusted the ribbon, typed a single line. This is a test. Black ink appeared crisp and immediate. Whoever typed that suicide note hadn't tested first, or hadn't cared. I turned my attention to the fireplace. No ash, no soot. No fire had been lit for days, yet Trask had turned toward it. Not the door, not the desk. I crouched. There, tucked behind the andiron, a sliver of black envelope, just visible in the gap beneath the grate. Gloved fingers retrieved it. Inside was a photograph, grainy, underexposed, but the faces were clear enough. Julian Trask, Claudia Langley, both smiling, at a beach, somewhere far from ledgers and murder. Back read in red pencil, "Tell her I kept the truth, and I paid." I returned to the brownstone at noon. Wolfe was in the plant room, communing with his orchids. I waited. When he emerged, he looked at me, then the envelope in my hand. "You found his voice. He didn't kill himself." Wolfe said nothing. He left a message, but not for us, for her. I nodded. He opened the envelope. His jaw tightened, barely. Then he walked to his desk, sat, and placed the photograph beside the file from last night. 2 lives. 1 secret, he said. Maybe more than one. I explained the beach photo, the smiles, the pencil scrawl. He listened without blinking. When I finished, he reached for the bell cord. Fritz arrived within seconds. "Lunch," Wolfe said. "For 2. Fritz inclined his head and disappeared. I sat in the red chair across from Wolfe. "You think Claudia had him killed?" Wolfe shook his head. "I think she was willing to let him die. Not quite the same." "No," he agreed, "but just as damning." The phone rang. I answered. It was Kramer. He didn't ask for Wolfe. "Tell your boss I got the tox report. Trask didn't drink the cyanide. It was injected. That's a peculiar way to commit suicide." "No kidding. And get this. We found a smudge on the back of the suicide note. Not a print, just oil. Too much for one man. Someone moved him. Someone placed him." He hung up. I relayed it to Wolfe. He grunted. "Then the clock advances. We must act before another page turns." He lifted the photograph again. "She didn't hire me to solve a murder," he said softly. "She hired me to aim the blame." Where? At anyone but herself. We sat in stillness again. The orchids behind the glass caught the winter. Light, fragile, immortal. Outside, sirens sang their midday dirge. Inside, a plan began to form. Wolfe reached for a pad and ink. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Call Miss Langley. Invite her for tea, today. She won't like it. Nor do I like murder. Yet we both must attend." I rose. As I reached the door, Wolfe spoke once more. "Bring the photograph, but not the envelope." "Why?" "Because it bears more than a message." I paused. "It bears intent." I nodded and left. Behind me, Wolfe exhaled. Long, controlled. A second death, but not the last. Not yet. The morning passed with the hush particular to Wolfe's brownstone when orchids were in conference and the phone remained mercifully still. I'd just made a truce with a stubborn newspaper column when Fritz's measured steps padded into the office, the kind he saved for information that required delicacy. He held a small glass jar at arm's length, its contents a warm rust, deep, saffron threads, dry but fragrant. "Mr. Wolfe." I was polishing the spice shelf when I noticed this. His voice, always composed, had taken on a timbre that hinted at quiet alarm. Wolfe didn't glance up from the ledger, where his forefinger tracked a neat column of figures he had already memorized twice over. "You interrupt my post-prandial digestion to present saffron beneath the cork," Fritz said, placing the jar delicately on Wolfe's desk blotter. "There is paper." Now Wolfe looked, briefly, but his left hand moved, plucked the jar with uncharacteristic directness, and turned it in his palm. Beneath the cork stopper, barely folded, a corner of parchment protruded, yellowed and tight, from age and concealment. He extracted it with tweezers, flattened it, and said nothing for the better part of a minute. "Archie," he said finally, "come here." I rose from my red chair, circled the desk, and leaned in. The handwriting was precise, male, ink faint but legible. "If they find out I've spoken, it won't be Langley in the ground next. It'll be me. They buried the truth under Vestal 17. Not a client, not a transaction, a siphon. I have the records. If I disappear, it's because they got to me first." Langley. I let out a low whistle. So he knew. Long before the brandy. Wolfe nodded, still reading. "It is a testament. Unsent. Hidden in a place no man would think to look. Except a chef. Fritz is not a man. He is an institution," Wolfe replied. Fritz, who had retreated to the doorway, allowed the faintest of smirks. Wolfe leaned back, his bulk settling into the yellow leather with the sigh of worn habit. "And now we know. Langley tried to whistle. They heard him warming up. I took the note carefully, folded it to the original creases, and placed it inside a clean envelope. You want a safe place for this? Yes, Wolfe said. And bring the resignation letter from Mr. Trask. I fetched the folder from the cabinet. Trask's letter had arrived 2 days before he was found, necktie askew, an old Underwood typewriter still humming its false suicide note. Wolfe held both papers beside each other. Observe the slant. I did. Trask's letter leaned just enough to the right to suggest nervous formality. Langley's note had a straighter spine. Different hands, I asked. Different intentions, Wolfe murmured. And yes, different men. I glanced at him. So someone forged Trask's resignation. Indeed. To make it look like he folded. When he didn't, Wolfe nodded. Precisely. They murdered Langley for uncovering the theft. They murdered Trask for threatening to speak of it. He pressed both documents flat against the blotter. And now, he said softly, we have proof that both men knew, and someone else knew they knew. I raised a brow. You think there's a third? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I think there's someone watching us watch. He closed the ledger. The room, lit only by the green-shaded desk lamp, held its breath. Archie, he said, we are no longer investigating a murder. I met his gaze. What are we investigating then? He picked up the saffron jar and held it to the light. A war. Wolfe turned the saffron jar slowly in his palm, as though the motion might conjure a full confession from its glass walls. Then he set it down gently, like a relic. I've underestimated Claudia, he said. Most men do, I replied. That's half her strategy. Wolfe's lips compressed. She is not merely withholding. She has misdirected. That is deliberate. I crossed to the drinks cabinet, poured a half-inch of rye, and returned to my chair. Wolfe didn't object, which meant he was thinking. Hard. She brought us the ledger, I offered, knowing full well what was in it. Not knowing what we might find, Wolfe corrected. She hoped we'd discover something, but not everything. She wanted blame apportioned, surgically. To who? Langley, Trask, the dead. I took a sip. She wanted it closed before it reached the living. Wolfe tapped the envelope containing Langley's note. She feared it might point elsewhere. The desk phone rang. I lifted the receiver. Nero Wolfe's office. This is Claudia Remington, came the voice. Is Mr. Wolfe available? I glanced at him. He made no sign. I covered the mouthpiece. She's fishing. Throw her back, Wolfe murmured. I returned to the call. He's indisposed. Miss Remington, I can take a message. She paused. Tell him I've found something that changes everything. I'd like to bring it by. I'll relay the offer, I said, and hung up. Wolfe's brows lifted. She will arrive in 30 minutes with a tailored truth. You going to hear her out? He leaned forward. I'm going to let her hang herself, with silk thread. We didn't have to wait long. At precisely 7:30, the doorbell rang. Fritz, predictably, did not answer. I did. Claudia stood in a smart grey coat, gloved, lips red as opera. Velvet. Her smile was brittle. Mr. Goodwin. Miss Remington. Wolfe's expecting you. In the office, Wolfe hadn't moved from his chair, though he had placed both documents, the resignation and the warning, beside one another. On the desk, a neat trap, waiting to be sprung. She sat without invitation. That earned her a blink from Wolfe. I found this. She reached into her purse, withdrew a photograph, and set it gently on the desk. Wolfe didn't touch it. I stepped forward to inspect it. Claudia, younger, standing beside Trask in a summer garden. His arm around her waist. Not casual, familiar. She watched me. We were once close. Before all this. You didn't mention that, I said. It didn't seem relevant. At the time, Wolfe made a low sound. Not quite a hum, not quite. A scoff. You brought this, he said. To suggest grief. Claudia's eyes narrowed. No, to suggest motive. For whom? Wolfe asked. You? She said nothing. You are not grieving, Miss Remington. You are insulating. You feared the ledger might connect you to Vestal 17. So you brought us a decoy. That's not... He raised a hand. You did not hire me to solve a murder. You hired me to aim the blame. She stood, quickly, the chair legs scraping. The rug, Wolfe continued, voice even. Langley discovered the siphon. Trask hesitated. You delivered them both. She backed toward the door. You can't prove that. I don't need to, Wolfe said. Not yet. She turned to me. You'll regret helping him. I usually do, I replied. She left. The front door clicked shut. Wolfe stared at the saffron jar. Keep the note secure. I nodded. He leaned back, closed his eyes. I dislike being used, Archie. You weren't. Not really. I was. And now I intend to return the favor. The room went quiet again. Outside, snow began to fall on Manhattan. Rain pressed faint lines against the library windows, a subtle metronome for Nero Wolfe's brooding silence. He sat in his yellow chair, bulk immobile, gaze fixed on the freshly typed invitations arrayed before him. Fritz had penned each one under Wolfe's dictation, every comma placed with judicial precision. Archie leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. You're serious about this? Paper invitations, in triplicate, hand-delivered. Wolfe didn't look up. A murder, Mr. Goodwin, demands courtesy. Even when the guests arrive under threat, chivalry ain't what it used to be. Indeed, which is why we supply our own. 3 cream-coloured envelopes sat in a neat stack, bearing names in Fritz's elegant hand. Milton Dole, Remington Bryce, Claudia, Cyril, thick paper, wax seal. Wolfe's peculiar version of theatre. I take it you want me to charm Dole and Remington and, coax Claudia? Wolfe looked up. Charm if you can, force if you must. Fritz entered with Wolfe's afternoon beer and a tray of radishes, though Wolfe ignored both. You'll start with Dole, Wolfe said. He is slippery. Remington next, Claudia last. Saving the best for dessert? Saving the most unstable. Wolfe rose with unexpected effort. His hands hovered near the orchids, but did not touch. Something was unraveling inside him. I could feel it from across the room. The photograph, the forgery, Langley, Trask. Too many pieces resisted arrangement. Wolfe hated disarray. We'll host them here tomorrow. 6 p.m. Tell Kramer. You're warning Kramer? Yes. He may thank me. Or not. I pocketed the envelopes. All right, boss. One tour of Manhattan's rogues coming up. Outside, the dusk was thick as broth. The city hadn't slept well in days. Nor had I. I headed downtown to the offices of Dole and Remington, a law firm that operated like an eel tank, sleek, smooth, and always a few bones floating at the bottom. Milton Dole was not in. The secretary, blonde and loyal, claimed ignorance. I waited. An hour later, Dole returned from an unseen lunch with an invisible friend. He took one look at me, frowned, and tried to close the door to his office. You'll want this, I said, sliding the envelope between his fingers and the brass knob. Wolfe requests your presence. Requests? Formally. That's the wax seal talking. I'm just the messenger. I'm busy. Wolfe said charm first, but I have no plans tonight. He opened the envelope. His face tightened. He read it again. What happens if I don't come? I return, with Kramer, possibly a subpoena. He nodded. Lips tight. 6 sharp? Or sharp things may follow. Dole shut his office door. I crossed to the next building, where Remington Bryce was admiring himself in the reflection of a whiskey decanter. Mr. Goodwin, to what do I owe the grim honor? Invitation, Mr. Bryce. Wax, script and all. He took it, slit it open with a penknife, and raised an eyebrow. He really believes he's got the killer. He's betting your life on it. Remington chuckled dryly. Wouldn't be the first time. Tomorrow, 6. No excuses. Wouldn't miss it. Sounds fatal. One more to go. Claudia Cyril. That, I knew, would be the hard part. Claudia Cyril answered her apartment door in a housecoat. Cigarette burning. Down to the filter. Her eyes scanned me, then the envelope in my hand. Mr. Goodwin. Another delivery. From Mr. Wolfe. Not flowers this time. She took the envelope, glanced at the seal, and opened it. Her eyes didn't move as she read. Just her, jaw tightened slightly. He's calling everyone back. He wants the truth assembled under one roof. And if I decline, then he'll assume you're hiding something. And Kramer will arrive with boots and questions. She looked past me into the hallway, then back. I'll be there. 6. With bells on, I'm sure. I left before she could light another cigarette. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the plant rooms. I briefed him as he misted orchids, face unreadable. All 3 agreed. Naturally. Guilt is obedient when cornered. And Kramer? Expecting. Our call. I phoned the precinct. Kramer wasn't thrilled. You're parading suspects now, Goodwin. Wolfe promises a show worth your badge. Bring your scowl. If this is another goose chase, I'll skin you both. Bring salt. We'll be ready. That night, Wolfe did not dine. He sat in the office, yellow chair unmoving, eyes closed, thinking in that still, volcanic way he had. You don't think Claudia's our girl anymore, I ventured. No, she's complicit, not the instigator. Remington, Dole, puppets, pulled by money, pride, and fear. Then who? That is for tomorrow, when the net tightens. I watched him, the way his hand rested on the chair's arm. Steady, still. Wolfe's calm was the kind forged in heat. The clock struck 10. Rain still tapped at the window panes. Fritz entered with a warm towel and silent grace. Wolfe dismissed him with a nod. Tomorrow, Mr. Goodwin, we end this. About time. He opened his eyes. It's never about time, it's about precision. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Vestal 17, Claudia's lie, Langley's fear, Trask's resignation, Dole's retreat, Remington's smirk. They all orbit something. You know what it is, I suspect. And if you're wrong, then I'll let Kramer have the pleasure. The next morning dawned grey and damp. The invitations lay on Wolfe's desk, now opened and accounted for. The storm outside had stilled, but inside it gathered. Fritz polished the red guest chairs. Wolfe summoned me early. He wore a grey suit darker than usual. A sign. Today we deliver. 1 murderer gift-wrapped. No, 3 truths. 1 crime. 1 verdict. Sounds operatic. No, Mr. Goodwin. Operas end in death. This ends in justice. At 5:30 Fritz prepared the room. Warm brandy, lamplight, and silence. At 5:50, Kramer arrived with 2 uniforms and a grimace. He's here? Waiting. At 6 sharp, the bell rang. The guests had arrived. The air in the office was thick with silence, though not of the peaceful sort. Fritz had drawn the curtains tighter against the dusk, letting only the golden pool of lamplight spill over the centre of the room. Archie stood near the red armchair farthest from Wolfe's desk, arms folded, eyes narrowed toward the front door as if expecting a knock that hadn't come. Claudia sat rigid in the chair opposite Wolfe. Her gloved hands were clasped so tightly, in her lap, that the tips had turned bloodless. She wore the same navy wool coat from the day before, its collar still bearing a trace of autumn's grit. Wolfe, nestled in his yellow chair, gazed not at her, but at the envelope he now rested atop. The blotter. It was unsealed, its contents known, its implications carefully arranged in his mind. You are aware, he said, voice level, that a falsehood, once presented, demands a cost. Claudia said nothing. Her eyes did not meet his. Wolfe shifted the envelope slightly, almost as if it weighed more than it did. You engaged me to solve a murder, or so you claimed. You presented your need in the language of the innocent, eager for vindication. Still, silence. Yet, here is a photograph. Wolfe tapped the envelope. Not obtained through your volition, I grant you, but unsolicited. It shows you with Julian Trask, not merely acquainted, intimate. I never denied knowing him, Claudia said, low and controlled. No, but you omitted the relevance, and as any decent lawyer might affirm, omission is the more convenient cousin of deceit. Archie moved behind Wolfe's chair and leaned slightly against the bookshelf. He said nothing, but his gaze drifted to Claudia with something less than warmth. Wolfe breathed in deeply. I dislike being maneuvered. I dislike false premises, and I especially dislike being made a pawn in the games of others. He placed the photograph on the desk. A young Claudia, hair longer then, stood beside Julian Trask, arm hooked into his. The backdrop was unmistakable. A garden terrace in Westchester. A fundraiser Wolfe had declined to attend, but whose social column had reached even him. The implications are evident, Wolfe said. But I reserve judgment. It is not the photograph alone that damns you. Claudia's hands unclasped slowly. She looked at the photograph, but did not reach for it. Miss Vaughan, Wolfe continued, your pretense was one of concern, for Langley, for justice, but the lies have corroded your scaffolding. The truth must now be constructed without you. Archie pushed off the shelf. We've confirmed the ledger. Anomalies, he said with practiced ease. Vestal 17 wasn't a client, it was a channel. Dummy accounts, fake mergers. Langley knew, Wolfe said, and died for it. Wolfe's fingers formed a steeple beneath his chin. Then Mr. Trask dies, and now we know his resignation was forged. The handwriting does not match. Claudia's breath caught. Ah, Wolfe said. You didn't expect we'd find that. He told me to protect her, Claudia murmured. That's all. Who? Wolfe asked, without effect. Her gaze dropped. Ava. Archie's eyebrows lifted. You were shielding Miss Remington, Wolfe asked. I thought, if you thought I was guilty, it would stop there. Then you're a fool, Wolfe replied coldly. No one believes the story ends with you. Archie stepped forward. We have the bottle, Langley's decanter. Fritz found trace residue under the rim. The lab confirmed cyanide. Wolfe's voice dropped a tone. Cyanide, Miss Vaughan. Poison. A direct method for someone who feared exposure. Ava's affair with Trask would have ruined her, Claudia said. And her role in the laundering. I only learned later. She begged me. And so you lied. Yes. The room fell silent again. The clock ticked once. Twice. Wolfe nodded. Then we are no longer dancing. You'll turn her in? I am not the police, Wolfe said. But you told Kramer that I would deliver the killer. I intend to. Claudia looked up. There was something faint in her expression. Not hope, but the space it might inhabit someday. Wolfe rose, slowly, and signaled to Archie. Prepare the room. We will have guests. Archie stood in the hallway with the invitations, stiff white cards bearing Wolfe's seal. One each for Claudia, Remington, and Dole. Fritz had embossed them himself. Too formal for murder, perhaps. But Wolfe insisted on ritual. Remington arrived first, flanked by shadows. She wore a silk scarf and gloves that hadn't known cold. She entered with the precision of someone used to being obeyed. Miss Remington, Wolfe said as she stepped into the office. Please be seated. She sat where Claudia had earlier. Wolfe's chair hadn't moved. Archie ushered Dole in next. The man looked chewed at the edges, suit wrinkled, eyes sunken. He didn't speak, merely nodded and collapsed into the next red chair. Claudia entered last. Her coat was gone, replaced with a black blouse, as if shedding one role for another. Wolfe waited for silence. Then, we are gathered, not for tea, nor for pleasant reminiscence. We are here for the truth. He looked to Claudia. Miss Vaughan has confessed to misleading me, to shield someone she believed worth shielding. Ava's chin lifted. She needn't name you, Wolfe continued. I shall. Dole stirred. Remington sat frozen. Langley, Wolfe said, discovered discrepancies. Trask tried to act. Both are dead. Archie opened a drawer and placed a bottle on the table. This is Langley's brandy, the one you served at the meeting. It contained poison. Remington's fingers twitched. Cyanide, Wolfe said. Efficacious. Swift. You have no proof, she said flatly. We have more than motive. Archie produced the ledger. The laundering was real. Vestal 17 was a false shell. Money moved through it like smoke through a sieve. Wolfe nodded. Mr. Trask's resignation letter was forged. Claudia did not write it. You did. Remington's voice cracked. He was going to ruin me. You ruined yourself. Dole stood. You killed them both. Langley would have exposed me. Trask was weak. He wanted to confess. So you poisoned the bottle? Archie asked. I had no choice. Wolfe tilted his head. Miss Vaughan's lie was born of loyalty. Yours was born of fear. Kramer entered then, summoned by Fritz's signal. He surveyed the room. You said you'd deliver a killer, he muttered. Wolfe gestured to Remington. I do so now. Remington stood, poised for retreat. You'll not make the door, Kramer said, stepping forward. Remington exhaled, not regret, but defeat. She offered. Her wrists. Kramer snapped cuffs in place. Motive means confession. Hell of a day, Wolfe. It ends here. Kramer nodded once and led her out. The door shut. Dole looked to Claudia. She nodded faintly, then turned to Wolfe. Thank you, she said. Wolfe only grunted. Archie placed the decanter back in the drawer. Outside, rain began to fall. The snow outside had begun to gather in slow, deliberate flurries. From the office window, Manhattan looked hushed, blanketed in white silence that suited the day's conclusion. Kramer stood by the door, overcoat buttoned, hat low. His face was unreadable, save for the small crease above his brow that told you something about the last few hours had gotten under his skin. He'll walk quiet, Kramer said, jerking a thumb over his shoulder. Didn't say a word until the cuffs clicked. Archie closed the door behind him and crossed the room. Wolfe hadn't shifted from his chair. He didn't look up. Remington, Kramer continued, tried to talk her way out of it. Claimed she didn't know the bottle had poison. Claimed Claudia set it up. She would, Wolfe said. His tone was flat. But she didn't. Kramer snorted. You're telling me a woman kills a man to cover up an affair, launders money through a church trust, and still thinks she deserves a second chance? I'm telling you, Wolfe said. She did not act alone, nor was her motive. Passion. It was control and fear. Those are older than jealousy. The inspector glanced at Archie. I suppose I'm expected to be grateful for the neat little box you've put it all in. I expect only that you do your job, Wolfe replied. You've done it. Now you may go. Archie stepped in to smooth it over, catching Kramer, with a half shrug that said, you know how he is. But Kramer was already halfway down the hall. When the door finally shut, the office fell quiet. Wolfe exhaled, not loudly, but in a way that told Archie he'd been holding something in. Not tension, exactly. Something older. Weariness, maybe. The kind that clings after a long, intricate battle where no one really wins. Archie circled around the desk and sat. That went about as clean as it was ever going to, he said. Claudia's free. Ava's not, and the press is going to eat it up. Banker's wife turned money launderer, with a priest's signature on half the wire transfers. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. She'll be remembered, he said, but not for what mattered. Archie raised a brow. Langley? Wolfe nodded once. He whispered something before he died. You heard? Yeah, Archie said quietly. He said, tell Claudia. Then he was gone. I don't believe he meant her, Wolfe murmured. Not directly. Archie studied him. Then who? Wolfe didn't answer. Just then, Fritz entered with a small silver tray. Upon it, a dish, delicate, fragrant, golden in hue. He set it before Wolfe with quiet ceremony. I use the saffron you approved, Fritz said, and half the lemon peel, as you prefer. Wolfe regarded the dish, then lifted a fork, tasted. A pause. Then, too much cinnamon. Fritz gave a short nod and disappeared again. Archie chuckled under his breath. Man solves a murder, clears an innocent woman, and still can't let the cook off easy. I hold standards, Wolfe replied, and went back to his orchids without another word. End of part 1, 600 words exactly. Now writing part 2, 600 more words, to complete the 1-200 word scene. The banker's last whisper. Part 2 of 2, 600 words, of 1-200 total. Wolfe's gaze remained fixed on the delicate cattleya in bloom. Its violet edges curled slightly, kissed by moisture from the recent misting. He reached for a small brush and began dusting the petals, as though the room hadn't just emptied of murderers and men of law. Archie let the silence stretch. In Wolfe's world, nothing was rushed. Not a meal, not a death, not a truth. Still, some things begged to be spoken. So, Archie said finally, Claudia walks. She does, Wolfe replied, not looking up. I gave her no apology, but also no charge. She lied. She shielded, Wolfe corrected. Not from justice, from grief. A woman loved her friend enough to ruin her name. Archie rose and moved to the window. Outside, snow laced the iron railing. Street lamps burned in the dusk like distant embers. She'll carry it, Archie said, even if no one else knows. Wolfe didn't reply. Archie turned. Langley knew about Vestal 17, about how the money moved, maybe even who signed off. That whisper, it wasn't for justice. He didn't want revenge. He wanted someone protected. Yes, Wolfe said, and not Claudia. He moved to his desk and sat, folding his hands before him. The lamplight caught on the creases of his brow. Remington's records, Wolfe said. Quiet payments, withdrawals staggered in pairs. The laundering was intentional, but subtle. If not, for Langley's ledger, we'd never have traced the route. She kept it tight. She feared exposure, but also clung to control. And when Langley discovered it, she panicked. Poison was not a first resort, but it was a sure one. And Trask? Archie asked. An echo. He wanted out. That resignation letter was a cry, not an exit. When she saw him wavering, she ended it. Archie paced once, hands in his pockets. You think she loved him? No, Wolfe said. She needed him. That's far more dangerous. The office dimmed slightly as clouds thickened over Manhattan. Fritz returned, carrying a tray with 2 small cups of coffee. He set them down and left without a word. Wolfe sipped. Acceptable, he said. Archie sat again, watching his employer closely. Do you believe we did right? I believe we did what was required, Wolfe said. The rest is sentiment. And Langley, he died whispering a truth meant for someone who might never understand it. Archie nodded slowly. Maybe that's all a whisper is. Not a cry for help. Just hope. Faint, but enough. A long silence settled between them. Outside, the snow fell thicker now, blanketing the street below. A cab passed, its tires hissing in the slush. Somewhere down the avenue, a church bell rang 6. Fritz entered once more, this time with a covered dish. One more attempt, he said. Wolfe lifted the cover, studied the plate. Another saffron creation. Precise, restrained, without flourish. He tasted. This time, he said nothing. He nodded, just once. Fritz, receiving more than he'd expected, turned and left. Archie smiled. So ends the case. Wolfe sipped his coffee. There will be another. There always is. They sat in the warm silence of the brownstone as the world outside turned white. Manhattan had turned to frost. The trees outside the brownstone were latticed with snow, each limb touched with ice. Inside, the air was still, the sort of stillness that arrives only after a storm. Kramer stood near the door. His hat was in his hands. His eyes were not on Wolfe, but somewhere fixed on the patterned rug between them. He confessed. Kramer muttered. Not in so many words, but it's enough. Wolfe made no gesture of approval. He simply said, You'll find the accounting. Ledgers in the valise under the cabinet. The numbers match the missing funds. And the handwriting in the resignation letter was not Trask's. Kramer nodded once, lips tight. He tucked his hat beneath his arm. You're letting Claudia go? He asked. I am. Kramer didn't object. She lied, he said. Wolfe's gaze lifted from the armrest of his chair. She protected someone. It's not always the same thing. Kramer turned. No charge? No apology either. Kramer gave a brief grunt. That, at least, was something he could live with. The door closed behind him. Archie rose from the red armchair, stretching out his legs. He glanced toward the windows, then moved to draw the curtains wider. The light outside had turned pale and silver, dusted with the early signs of snowfall. Quite the finale, Archie said. Remington, behind it all. Trask caught in the wake. Claudia tangled up in guilt. And Langley, poor devil, the only one who tried to do right. Wolfe gave no reply. I keep thinking about that whisper, Archie went on. Langley didn't sound angry. He sounded afraid. He wasn't afraid for himself, Wolfe said quietly. No, he was worried about her. Yes, Wolfe said. And not just her. Archie turned. You think Claudia was trying to shield Ava? I think she knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to guess where the real rot was. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half-lidded. The orchids behind him rustled faintly, stirred by the gentle hum of the radiator. There's a kind of loyalty, Wolfe said, that does not seek reward. It simply endures. Archie poured 2 fingers of brandy into a glass. You think that's what this was? Loyalty? Claudia misled us. She redirected the blame, but she didn't kill anyone. And when it mattered, she stepped aside. Archie raised the glass. To Langley then, the only one who died trying to keep someone else clean. Fritz entered. He carried a covered silver dish and set it down on the tray beside Wolfe. I've made it modest, Fritz said. A simple saffron reduction with roast parsnip. Wolfe lifted the lid. A faint trail of steam escaped, carrying with it the sharp, earthy scent of saffron and lemon peel. He took a bite, then the faintest nod. Fritz smiled, rare and fleeting, and left. Archie chuckled. So we've solved the murder, cleared the lady, and ended the day with edible saffron. A miracle. I do not believe in miracles, Wolfe said, but he took another bite. End of part 1, 600 words. Part 2 begins below. The Bankers. Last Whisper. Part 2 of 2, 600 words of 1,200 total. The lamplight bathed the office in amber calm. Wolfe dabbed at the corners of his mouth with a linen napkin. He set down the fork with finality. Not the weariness of defeat, but the contentment of a man who had endured chaos and now returned to form. Archie leaned against the edge of the desk. You think Kramer will keep it neat? He will try, Wolfe said. But a financial crime with emotional entanglements is rarely clean. The press will make Claudia the villain, Archie said. She's beautiful, privileged, and complicated. Wolfe let out a small breath. She will survive, so long as she knows she cannot atone for someone else's guilt. Archie frowned. Do you think she'll try? No, Wolfe said. That's what makes her redeemable. Outside, the snow thickened. Cars rolled slowly past the brownstone, their headlights smudged by falling flurries. A cab honked twice, at the corner, then faded down 9th. I don't mind telling you, Archie said. I liked Langley. Something about him, honest eyes, worn shoes. Worn shoes are not proof of virtue, Wolfe said. But Langley had restraint. He might have ruined Remington publicly. Instead, he whispered, hoping foolishly that someone else would stop her. Archie moved to the bookcase, running a finger along the spines. You ever think we get too close to this stuff? He asked. Too familiar? No, Wolfe said. Archie turned, a brow raised. Wolfe added, familiarity is a tool. Sentiment is the danger. Fritz reappeared briefly, removing the empty plate. He did not speak. His footsteps, like always, were nearly soundless. Wolfe reached for the orchid journal on the table beside his chair. You returning upstairs? Soon, Wolfe said. Archie crossed the room slowly. He paused before the fireplace, where the embers were still faintly glowing. He added a log with practiced ease and watched it catch. I think Langley knew Ava was laundering funds, and he knew Claudia didn't know. Yes, Wolfe said. He kept his silence because he hoped one of them, either one, might come clean. He misjudged, Wolfe said. Claudia protected her friend. Ava protected herself. Archie sat again, folding his hands behind his head. You know, he said, for all the papers Langley left behind, his last act was still a whisper. He could have shouted, gone to the press. He chose to speak low. To you. No, Wolfe said, turning the orchid journal's page. He whispered to whoever found him. I was only the first to listen. Archie stared at the ceiling for a moment. Funny thing about whispers, he said. They carry, if you're quiet enough. Outside, the city softened under its fresh coat of snow. Tires hissed and boots thudded on pavement. But inside the brownstone, all was warm, velvet, and still. Fritz passed once more, pausing at the threshold. Another dish tomorrow, he said. Less saffron, more restraint. Wolfe didn't look up. Do as you must. Fritz bowed slightly and was gone. Archie rose. I'm heading home. Wolfe didn't answer. Archie grinned. Orchids, then. Let no man interfere. As he left, the door shut with a gentle click. Wolfe reached for his watering bulb and turned to the cattleyas. One bloomed defiantly, purple and white, its scent faint but stubborn. He smiled, once, and returned to his orchids. I was in the kitchen when the parcel came. Fritz had been peeling thin ribbons of citrus over the stove, something he insisted deepened the flavour of his tart. The snow was still falling outside, lazy flakes tracing soft arcs down to 35th. He handed me the envelope without looking. From her? He asked. I glanced at the postmark. Came from Beacon Hill. That's her all right. It was thick cream paper, tied with waxed string. Claudia's handwriting had the restraint of someone taught by nuns and polished by money. Inside was a single note in a small box. I read aloud. For Mr. Wolfe, as promised. No apologies enclosed. Only orchids. I opened the box. Nestled inside soft tissue were 2 orchids, dried, pressed, and preserved. One violet, one white. Claudia had sent them not as a gift, but a gesture. Fritz made a noise that might have been approval. Then he turned back to the stove. You'll stay for supper, he said flatly. I've made the saffron tart. I'd risk the weather for that, I said. He allowed himself a very faint smirk. In the dining room, Wolfe sat waiting. The yellow chair pushed slightly back from the table, napkin folded once across his lap, and book face down beside them all. Bread plate. The chandelier cast a dull gold over the walls. Fritz served without comment. When the tart arrived, its golden surface shone faintly under a glaze of lemon. Wolfe took a bite. He chewed slowly, deliberately. Then, finally, tolerable. Fritz inclined his head, then vanished through the door. I sat across from Wolfe, my fork already halfway to my mouth. I didn't wait for formalities. One bite told me Fritz had used the good saffron, not the powdered variety he reserved for risotto, but the full red strands soaked overnight in stock. We ate in near silence. Wolfe rarely conversed at dinner unless provoked or appalled. This was neither. When we were finished, he pushed back and sighed. A thick book lay beside his plate. Hardcover. German. Probably botanical. You know, I said, sipping from my glass. She didn't have to send the orchids. No, Wolfe replied. But she did. Meaning. He waved. A hand. It means she understands symbolism. Gesture matters. I raised my glass. To gestures. Wolfe didn't lift his. But he looked at me, which in his world counted for sentiment. He reached for his book, opened it, settled back. I let the quiet return. It was the kind of silence I'd come to value. The silence that only comes when truth has been aired, lies revealed, and no one left bleeding. It didn't always end that way. Fritz passed again, collecting plates. He paused only once, to fold Wolfe's napkin precisely and retrieve the spent tart dish. I gave him a nod. He didn't return it, but I saw the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. From the window, I watched snow collecting on the wrought iron railing. Manhattan in winter had a strange grace. Dirt softened by white, noise dulled by weather. Even the taxis moved like they'd been taught manners. The scent of saffron lingered faintly in the room, tucked between the smell of old wood, polish, and the ever-present trace of orchids. Wolfe turned a page with deliberate precision, as though even his fingers refused haste. The lamplight gleamed off the polished surface of the book's cover. From the kitchen, the faint clatter of plates being stacked, water running, and the low hum of Fritz's radio. A German quartet in some minor key. I leaned back in the red chair, arms folded. You never told me what you really thought of Langley, I said. Wolfe didn't look up. An imperfect man, not a fool. His whisper, I said, wasn't for revenge. No, Wolfe murmured. It was a warning. To Claudia? To anyone listening? He closed the book, folded his hands atop it. His voice dropped slightly, rich with finality. Langley protected someone, at the cost of his own clarity. The impulse, though noble, was poorly executed. That is the nature of compromise. I studied him. You're saying he wasn't trying to settle a score. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that dying men often lie, not always to deceive, but to shield. A beat passed. You've done that, I said. His eyes flicked to me. You've bent truth to shield a reputation or preserve a sentiment. You've lied. Wolfe's brows rose half an inch. A declaration, not a question. A hunch, he sniffed. Then keep it. I do not indulge in speculation. You indulged her, I said. Claudia, you didn't press charges. She committed no crime. She concealed one. She was not alone in that. The sentence hung, heavy in the warm air. I watched the shadows on the ceiling shift slightly as the flames in the hearth cracked and stirred. I poured another glass, not out of thirst, but routine. Will she send another note? I asked. Wolfe shook his head. She has already said. Everything. The fire popped, sending a burst of sparks behind the screen. Outside, the snow had thickened, blanketing the stone steps and muffling the brownstone's perimeter, a world growing quieter by the minute. Inside, though, the silence felt earned, not the brittle hush of secrets, but the soft hush of endings. Fritz entered once more, this time with a fresh pot of coffee. He set it down, refilled Wolfe's cup with surgical precision, then mine. No words, just the rituals we all knew. Wolfe sipped, nodded, then returned to his book. I let him read, let Fritz clean, let the snow fall. But I watched him, the yellow chair, the heavy robe, the square jaw with its fine lines. A man who lived on schedule, who scorned disorder, and yet had followed a whisper into fire and come out untouched. He had solved it. He always did, but not without something spent. He closed the book again, let it rest on the table, folded his hands. Some bankers, he said, whisper truths. He looked toward the window. His voice was low. Others. Bury. Them. I raised my glass. To the ones who whisper. Wolfe didn't reply.